You can now save 20% off every single time you get that rich, tasty CBD-infused coffee sent straight to your door with a Strava Craft Coffee subscription. That's right. You pick out every 2, 3, 4, 6, or 8 weeks for them to send the coffee straight to your door. You'll save 20% every time. You'll never have to worry about running out of coffee or having to run down to the store to get some new beans. They will send them straight to you. And plus, it'll have those benefits that you get from the CBD-infused coffee, help you with headaches, aches, pains, whatever's ailing you. Strava Craft Coffee is CBD-infused, and it is delicious. So check it out and subscribe and have it sent straight to your door. If you don't want to subscribe and you just want to try it for the first time, use the code DNVR20, and you'll save 20% off your first order.
Number one for the one and only DNVR. 2 goes out to Zach, Mace, RK, and the bar. 3 for Mr. B in that old trophy case. Number 4 we're still waiting for. Well, bring on the chase. Out on the field, a mile high, Broncos win is our desire. Couple with a breakfast crew and a friend, bleed orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us at the DNVR. We are DNVR.
Welcome in to the DNVR Broncos podcast presented by MSU Denver Online. Check them out, msudenver.edu/online. They've got 40-plus hybrid programs and 750 total classes. Wherever and however you're trying to further your education, MSU Denver is the place for you. And if you want to work a full-time job while getting your education, MSU Denver students work twice as many hours as students at any other Colorado institution. They are the place to go, the place to be. So check them out, msudenver.edu/online today.
My boy, Ryan, what's going on, my friend? Is that a fresh haircut I see?
It's not, but that's just how I roll. You never know when it's just gonna look like I have a fresh haircut.
Well, you look sharp.
Well, thank you. A little bit of a tough night last night for the Buffs, but we got a good look at our true freshman quarterback, who everyone's been excited about, and he was pretty awesome. So, I as soon as they didn't have Nate Landman, I was ready for what was to come. None of the other linebackers know how to fit the run. So, it is what it is.
So the second half was kind of like a week 17 in the NFL, you could say, getting a look at the future.
Yeah, actually the whole game kind of felt like a week 17 in the NFL. And it was certainly very important for Brendan Lewis to get out there. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Who does this mean a lot to for the Denver Broncos? Because, there's an old adage in the NFL. You're always trying out for someone. You're always, you got to put it on film for 31 other teams. But you also sometimes have to put it on film for your own team. And I think there are some Broncos that need to put it on film this week. So, Zach, I want to start with this. I didn't prep you for this, but I want to start with a ranking. Who does this game mean the absolute most to on the Denver Broncos?
Well, I think you have to start with the most important position on the Denver Broncos, and that is Drew Lock. Because, Ryan, we've seen him have the ups and downs. There's no doubt about that. Ending this season on an up would be huge, but also on top of that, Ryan, he needs to continue to show at least some progress to end the season. So right there, Drew Lock is number one. Boy, do you go to the defensive side of the ball next and you look at guys who are on contracts?
Well, I don't know. I think that while Drew obviously is playing for the most here, because I think he could play his way out of the job. I don't think he has to play his way into the job, but a meltdown-y, terrible performance in Week 17 that leaves a bad taste in the mouth of everyone, I think could put him in a tough position that he doesn't want to be in. I think it would have to be pretty bad. But I think there's another player who just really, really needs this. Really needs this, and that's Jerry Jeudy. He's not playing for a job or anything crazy like that, but he just needs to get off the schneid and just have a clean game and just, he just needs a catch because it felt like he dropped everything at the end of the last game. So I think he probably doesn't rank number one. It's hard to not rank Drew number one, but I really do think he's number two in terms of just needs it for himself, needs it for the fans, needs it for the coaching staff to just go out there and show like, okay, I worked on it this week. The yips are gone. We can move on now.
Yeah, and I mean, Vic said that this could be a defining moment of his career. So right there, that makes it pretty important for him. But like you said, Ryan, he's not playing for a roster spot next year. But if he can rebound from this game, Vic's feeling good about him. And most importantly, because you and I talked about this a lot on Monday, Ryan, this is all mental for Jerry. If he can have a good mindset and confirm to himself that he can play in the NFL this week, I think that'll do wonders for him these next few months.
Yeah, and it's funny, just the narrative right now. I saw one local media person saying like he's not a bust, but he's been a bust, and it's just like, no, he hasn't. In my opinion,
Ryan, he's had about as much of a rookie year as you can expect. The first, I believe, 10 games of the season, Ryan, Jerry Jeudy was on pace for 980 receiving yards on the season. There's no bust there. That's a fantastic season. And that's 10 games. I'm not, picking up 2 games of the season and extrapolating that. No, that's 10 games. That's a good sample size. And it even seemed like he was quiet in those games. So that gives me the confidence of, holy cow, what can this guy do when he is being targeted 15 times like we saw this past week and he's not dropping the ball? And then these past 6 games, or I guess 5 games, Ryan, he has struggled a lot, hit that rookie wall. I think he only has 150 receiving yards or something like that. And so that has been tough for him. But a bust? Absolutely not. When over a 10-game stretch, you're averaging 900 or you have a 900-yard season, that's not even close.
Yeah, and I was getting into this with people yesterday because, I did the thing that for some reason Twitter really hates this year. I put out a clip from an article about Jerry Rice's career. And in the article, it points out, actually not in the clip that I tweeted, but earlier in the article, it points out that Jerry Rice, in his first 11 games as a rookie, had 10 drops, including the 11th game. He had 2 drops and a fumble that cost the 49ers the game. And it also says in there something along the lines of he was the butt of every joke from the local sports columnists. Like, it's like word for word. Oh, and then it says in there that he had like not a mental breakdown, but crisis on the sidelines after one of the drops. It's like word for word what Jerry Jeudy is going through right now.
He turned out okay, didn't he?
Yes, and I obviously wasn't comparing Jerry Rice to Jerry Jeudy and saying that Jerry Jeudy is going to become Jerry Rice now because he had those drops also. Like, drops aren't going to somehow make you better. But the point was, dropping passes as a rookie does not make you a bust. You know who a lot of people are saying the Broncos should have taken instead of Jerry Jeudy? There's a few names, but one of the names is CeeDee Lamb. Well, CeeDee Lamb has 8 drops. Jerry Jeudy has 9. Rookie drops happen. Julio Jones dropped the ball when he was a rookie. Devontae Adams dropped the ball a bunch when he was a rookie. Courtland Sutton dropped the ball a bunch when he was a rookie. It just happens. And it really is a 0% an indication that a player is a bust. One of the big busts that people bring up a lot is Darius Hayward-Bay, who had an insane drop rate. I believe as a rookie, he dropped 23% of his catchable passes, which is like mind-boggling. It's really hard to get your hands on accurate drop rate numbers. People keep referencing catch rate. There was a Denver Post column that came out in which they referenced catch rate, which just like is barely barely a wide receiver stat. Zach, if you were a wide receiver and you got targeted 100 times and every single time the quarterback spikes the ball at your feet, you would end up with a 0% catch rate.
I think the catch rate is more. It's way more than just a wide receiver. It speaks to the chemistry between the wide receiver and the quarterback, and not on the wide receiver.
It can be on the wide receiver, but there's way too many variables to take that stat and use it as if it's some sort of gospel on a wide receiver's ability to catch passes. It should be called like chemistry rate or something like that. Because it totally is the chemistry between a receiver and a quarterback. And Drew obviously has a hand in all those targets that aren't always connecting, and so does Jerry. So anyways.
Really quick, Ryan, I love that you've used multiple times in this that Jerry and Drew have hands in this. He has a hand in the catch rate. That's just masterfully done.
Maybe he needs 2 hands and 2 eyes in the catch rate, and it'll go up a little bit. Anyways, it's hard to get your hands on drop rate numbers, but like I said, Darius Hayward-Bay was like insanely high, and that's only just one of the reasons he was a bust. That's the other thing. Is the point that I was really trying to make is drops on their own are in no way a predictor of a player's bust potential. Now, when you combine them with other things, let's say Jerry Jeudy was dropping the ball consistently and he was also struggling to separate. Well, now I'm terrified. Let's say Jerry Jeudy is dropping the ball a bunch and he's not running the full route tree. Well, now I'm a little bit concerned. Dropping the ball, because if dropping the ball is the only thing that's stopping you from being a 1,000-yard receiver, it's really, really just not a predictor of who you're going to be moving forward. And it's the easiest thing of all the things you're going to ask a receiver to do in the NFL. It's the easiest thing to fix. So while I do think this is important for him mentally, this is not some sort of, if he doesn't have a good game, he's a bust, or he's a bust right now. He has to play his way out of being a bust.
Right. I totally agree with that. Ryan, one guy that we know is not a bust, and there's no debate to it, but I think this game is huge is fighting for a contract from the Broncos. And this is on the opposite side of the ball, and this is Mr. Justin Simmons. Ryan, this is like a final date before the guy decides if he's going to propose or not, if he's going to propose or walk away. I mean, this
is like
is
Bachelor finale,
exactly.
Which I haven't seen, by the way. No spoilers.
Yeah, don't be popping those spoilers up in the comment section. And this is how I think important this game could be, because Ryan, we know the Broncos really like Justin Simmons. Do they love him? Right now, you got to say no from what we've seen so far. Can Justin do anything to swoon John Elway to make sure that he falls in love with him so that he's getting that $15 million per year contract after this season? And I think for Justin to do that, he's got to have a game-changing game this week. And if he does that, then John can convince himself, these aren't just butterflies. This is love that I feel for Justin Simmons, because Justin's had a few game-changing moments this year. Can he do that again this week? I think this game could be huge for Justin's future.
Zach, my advice here is, if you are going on a date with someone and hoping that they're going to blow you away so much that you're going to fall in love with them and you're going to marry them, and you've been on, I don't know, around 64 dates with them before, I promise you, you're making the wrong decision. Now, why you aren't in love with them, I don't know. That's, sometimes it's just not there. But they're not going to do something in that 64th date that they didn't already do in the first 63 dates. The old adage is, when you know, and the Broncos don't know, or they know, and the answer is that this isn't love. I don't know why. We've had this conversation before, but I think it's just they don't quite think he's elite. I have a hard time fully disagreeing with them on that. Unfortunately, he's elite in so many other categories that you feel like they raised the boat up to the point where you say, yeah, he deserves that kind of money. But I don't think there's anything that Justin Simmons can do in this game that he hasn't done in the first three and 15/16 of his career, and so I have a hard time believing that's going to happen.
So then what about with the other safety position? Kareem Jackson, there's a little team option after this season on Kareem. Is he playing for anything this game, or is it just a foregone conclusion that he's back? Or could this game be, all right, who's better, Justin or Kareem? Who's ever better in this game is coming back next year. I mean, wouldn't that just be great if Vic told us that today and we just knew that this was, two good friends that had to fight for a job?
Yep. He's like, listen, each player gets a trip to the fantasy suites, and whatever happens
with who, Vic or John?
I do not want to think about that. Let's see what Mace thinks. We got Mace in the back here, so let's see what he thinks. Mace, do you think Kareem Jackson has anything specific to play for this week? Oh, he's muted. Off the top.
His shirt's looking fly, though.
His shirt does look great. I want that shirt specifically. We still don't have it.
Oh, we have the permanent mute right now. Uh-oh.
Oh, no, it's not a mute button.
Maybe getting to screw this soon.
Allie, maybe you
screw this.
It's got to be something with your mic, Mace.
Maybe he really doesn't want to talk about safety play.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't feel safe about that. For me, Zach, I don't think it's like that for Kareem Jackson.
And I don't.
They got to bring one of them back, right? They can't start from scratch back there. Kareem Jackson has played up to his contract, and I think he's been worth it. Aside from the unfortunate DUI, which held him out at the end of last season, he's been an exemplary player for the Broncos. He's going to cost a lot less than Justin Simmons next year, and because of that, I think he's pretty safe.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Ryan, I just had another one pop into my head. What about Melvin Gordon for a different reason than Melvin Gordon? Melvin Gordon is just over 100 yards away from a 1,000-yard season. And we know that there's, some people saying Phillip Lindsay may not be back next year, but I think this game could be big for Phillip Lindsay. Does Melvin Gordon come out, and if he has a huge game, could the Broncos just say their value in Phillip Lindsay is so different than what you and I think it is? And maybe it's not they just straight up let him walk, but maybe it's instead of that second round tender, which I think we all think he should get, they just do an original round tender and essentially let him walk because they say, look, Melvin Gordon's this fantastic player. We have him for another season. Maybe we have him for more seasons after this. And we know that, the Broncos really, really like Justin Simmons. I don't think you can say the Broncos really, really like Phillip Lindsay. We certainly know they don't love him.
Yeah, it's interesting just because, you can have Phillip Lindsay for fairly cheap next year. Oh, I can hear Mace's mic already.
Oh, great.
Yeah, there he is. I guess Melvin Gordon is playing for a little something here. I'm starting to wonder, like, if the plan is not to bring back Phillip Lindsay, which, good Lord, I'm not ready for the meltdown that's going to happen if that's the case. I'm starting to wonder if the plan is to look to the draft for, the new running back. And we've talked about it before. Like, there aren't too many places. It's weird to say this about a team that could be about to go 5-11.
Yeah.
But there aren't so many places on the roster where you're saying, like, oh, big hole here, big hole there. Got to work here, got to replace that. And I don't know. Obviously, some of that is the injuries. Some of that might be us overvaluing players and the organization also overvaluing players. But there's just not that many places where you're like looking and saying, oh, man, they've got to go here early in the draft. One of those places that you might not be expecting and all of a sudden they could go there early in the draft would be running back.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. I'd be shocked to see it in the first round, but
Me too.
second, third round running back, I do not think is without a question. And especially because they would say, okay, we got our guy in Melvin Gordon. Now let's bring this other guy in for a year to learn under him, and then he can really take off and be the guy after. And nowhere in that conversation is Philip Lindsay's name. Now, that doesn't mean they can't bring him back for $3 million to have 3 running backs, but if you're investing a second or third round pick along with $8 million in Melvin Gordon, it's not crazy to think that Philip Lindsay could have played his last game here. And again, I wouldn't do that, but just how we've seen the Broncos treat this running back position since Phil's been on the team, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Well, and you need money wherever you can find it, right? I mean, if you're trying to get Justin Simmons back, if you're presumably looking at a hedge quarterback on the market, whether it's a veteran, a youngish veteran, or someone like an Andy Dalton, perhaps, you need to create room somewhere with a cap that could be as low as $175 million. And they've got some decisions to make among Phil, Alexander Johnson, and Tim Patrick. I mean, if you give second round tenders to each of those guys, that's $3.3 million a pop. What if they just decide, okay, Phil's going to have the original round tender, which for him makes him undrafted. If they do that, he's as good as gone.
Yeah,
the second round tender is the only thing that keeps him around.
The second round tender is like the best deal in sports. You're getting a player that you believe is worth a second round pick for $3 million. It's like it should be a no brainer any time one of these guys is a legitimate contributor for you. So to me, if the Broncos do this, it's more of a mutual parting of ways, where Phil is just saying, like, I don't want to be back on the second round tenure. And they just say, like, okay, that's fine. You can go. I don't know if that's what's happening behind the scenes at all, but that's really the only way I could see that happening. Because if the Broncos just on their own are saying Philip Lindsay isn't worth $3 million, one, they're completely out of their minds. But two, it's just it doesn't make any sense, like from a football standpoint, to have a multi-time 1,000-yard rusher who went to the Pro Bowl potentially on a 1-year, $3 million contract. It's just it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and then what something that would happen from that is I would say the Chiefs would pick him up, but with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, they probably wouldn't. I mean, you'll probably see the Chargers scoop him, and then Justin Herbert will have Austin Eckler and Philip Lindsay or just something like that.
Yep. Yeah, Chris Harris Jr. will be in his ear telling him how great things are over there and come on down. And then the Broncos will somehow get beat by a 3-headed monster, all Colorado running back room of Philip Lindsay, Austin Eckler, and Kalen Ballage.
Oh my gosh, that would be. And then Devontae Booker the next week comes and tears them apart like he did earlier this year.
and then they're taking handoffs from the quarterback that Elway really liked.
Oh my gosh, why are we doing this to ourselves?
You know what? Actually, I think what is more likely for Phil, if the Broncos do give him that original round tender and he doesn't come back, I could see the Patriots making a run at him, because I could see Bill Belichick looking at Phil and saying, I'm not sure the Broncos used him right, but I have a plan for him that will maximize him.
Yeah, I mean, we went over this once. All the teams that you're afraid of Philip Lindsay going to are just good football teams. You don't want him going to good football teams because he's going to make them better. And the good football teams are going to want him, which means you should also want him. Green Bay, you're like, oh man, that would be dangerous. Like, you just go through all the good teams. You don't want him going there. Heck, how about Trevor Lawrence and Philip Lindsay and James Robinson, and that's scary. So
and Laviska, CU of Florida, right there.
Let's just take it to another level. The Jags have a lot of cap room, and let's say the Broncos don't get something done with Justin Simmons, and then Justin Simmons goes to Jacksonville because they say, we need some defensive leadership. We need on that side of the ball, and here's a kid who grew up just down the East Coast from us, about a couple of 100 miles down I-95. Let's bring him back to his home state and get invest $15 million in the safety position. All of a sudden, the Jags are becoming an emerging team, and they're a Bronco nightmare. And oh, by the way, if the Broncos lose on Sunday, the Jaguars are on their schedule next year.
Yeah, that is very, very true. Mace, we named off Drew Lock, Jerry Jeudy, Justin Simmons, and I guess Melvin Gordon added. Is there anyone that you think this game really means a lot to? They have something to play for here in Week 17 other than just pride.
I think somebody, you're kind of getting down the list here, but you've got somebody like Deshaun Williams who, if he has another solid game, is playing to be a part of the rotation. Draymond Jones could use a signature game at some point to solidify his place on the defensive line. So you're kind of getting down there. The interesting thing on some of these guys, and I would include Drew Lock in that, is I feel like this game isn't going to move the needle on the decision. I mean, for Drew Lock, for example, I feel like he can't necessarily move the needle positively as far as what the Broncos do to bring in someone else around him as at least competition. I think he can only move the needle negatively and take a step back. I don't think he can move it up from where he is based on what he does on Sunday.
And I agree with that completely. And kind of a guy in a similar situation, but maybe he could move the needle in a positive direction, is Lloyd Cushenberry. What if he comes out and just has a terrible, terrible game, and this progress that we continue to hear about from him, from Pat Shurmur and Vic Fangio, they really want to love him. I mean, they just need to be swept off their feet by him because they're waiting for it. But what if he comes out and has a terrible game? We found out from Vic Fangio last week that they have thought about Graham Glasgow playing center and that he's ready for that if they need to make the move in the offseason. And Vic, of course, after that said, but we really like Lloyd Cushenberry. Well, what if Cush comes out and just has a terrible game? Is that something that may make the Broncos think about, okay, we got this Netani Muti guy. We loved him in the one game we saw. Should we make this transition with Graham?
Yeah, I think that is maybe oversimplifying it a little bit. But, you know, Vic Fangio always talks about how they like to step away and then go back and watch all of the tape. And when you do that, I remember Mace talking about this last year with Garrett Bowles, I think. And he said, you know, sometimes you once you step away and you watch the tape as a whole, you aren't as enamored with how things happen at the end of the season. You're more in tune with how things happen on the whole season. Now, obviously, progress is worth something, and Garrett Bowles came out and proved that was real progress. But I think that, you know, there's an opportunity here to put on good tape, and the Broncos can say, okay, there's really good tape for the most of the second half of the season. But if you go out there and put bad tape, then that's really gonna, you know, it's gonna hurt all the good stuff you put in the middle, and you're going to see the bad at the beginning, the bad at the end. And I don't think it should be overlooked that I think Lloyd Cushenberry's worst game of the season came against the Raiders, just off the top of my head. So, yeah, I don't think he can completely just play his way out, but putting bad tape out there in Week 17 is not going to help his case if the Broncos are having those very serious conversations. If he goes out there and plays the way he has been playing, which is on an upward trend, then I think they're going to say, look, you know, we invested in this guy. We got to roll with him. Yeah,
because I agree. And that's what they want to do. They want to fall in love with Lloyd Cushenberry, their third round pick. And so, I think he's your starting center next year. But that's what, you know, a terrible game could make them think about.
Yeah, and I do think it's wise to have Graham Glasgow a little more cross-trained at center, regardless of what happens in this game. Maybe you give him some snaps, but the ideal thing is Cushenberry going into year 2 as the center. And really, it's got to be something disastrous for them to move off of that point. Now, the interesting thing with Bowles, when they took a step back and looked at the season, their judgment was, we're not going to bring in anybody else, but we're going to have somebody compete with him in Elijah Wilkinson. Now, that competition fizzled because Elijah wasn't healthy at the start of training camp. So you wonder if they watch the film of the entire year. And if he does have a lousy game on Sunday, do they say, well, there's going to be some form of competition on the interior, just in general? That's what I'm curious about.
Right, and they also decided they didn't want to sign him to his 5th-year option after watching the tape.
Yeah.
Which how much money did that end up costing them this year, or next year, I should say?
What would the 5th-year option have been? $11 million?
Yeah, so I think it ended up costing them right around $4 or $5 million.
That's pretty costly when you're talking about a cap that's going down and cap figures that are crunched. That's almost 2 second-round tenders right there.
I was just gonna say that exactly. If you're talking about, you got to save money on second-round tenders, which is just kind of asinine to me. Then yeah, you could have saved that money by just picking up the 5th-year option on Garrett Bowles. I still think they played it right, but their job is to be able to predict these type of things, and they messed that one up.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is the 5th-year option, it would have had him back for $11 million, a cap figure of $11 million, and they couldn't have kicked that down the road any. So they're actually in better shape for 2021 because he's got a cap number of $5 million. But then you're kicking the can down the road a little bit because in 2022 he's got a cap number of $22 million. So you better hope that revenues rebound significantly, as everyone hopes. And then also you start thinking about the broadcast and streaming contracts for 2022 to make that number palatable, because if things are status quo, that number is going to be a little bit painful in 22.
Well, there you go. It actually worked out quite well for them. One last thing. Bradley Chubb shouldn't play, right? Like, shouldn't even be a question.
Nope. Yeah, there's absolutely no reason. He showed you enough. He's probably too far away from 10 sacks for him to personally push it too far. He should not play. Yeah,
it's funny because when I was on the Raiders radio station show just now, and one of the co-hosts is Mike Prickshard, a former Bronco. You've got an ex-Bronco, an ex-CU buff doing a Raiders show, just how these things work nowadays. But a big topic was, is Bradley Chubb going to play? And I said, look, Bradley's going to want to play, but if you're thinking about this practically, A, you don't want him to exacerbate an injury, but B, anybody who is questionable in any way, anyone of value, you shouldn't have him play. The players out there are going to give their maximum effort. Nobody's going to tank on that field on Sunday. But you can say, yeah, as an organization, you can say, yeah, we're going to be cautious, but in the back of your mind be thinking, you know what, winning this game doesn't have any tangible benefit here. So why risk a guy like Bradley Chubb? Just let him sit and reset him for 21.
When they even just started practicing Bradley in training camp, and we're kind of trying to get him out there for week 1, and that was kind of part of the narrative was like getting him back. I was terrified. I felt like they were playing it wrong the whole way, and I was just like it was like a scary movie when you're just waiting for the scene to happen. You're like, I know it's going to happen soon. I know there's going to be something, some loud spook any second. That's what I was waiting for. And so I feel like the fact that you made it through the season without Bradley Chubb re-aggravating the knee injury or anything like that is like you got kind of lucky. And so just take your luck and run and just say like, all right, we did it. He's through this. And everyone says when they have, an ACL injury, it wasn't until the second year after you rehabbed the injury that you really got back to who you were and felt fully back. So just make sure that you have that next year.
Well, and everyone did their job too. Everyone can congratulate themselves and just say, good job. Let's move on to next year with Bradley, because he's the Pro Bowler. So they successfully rehabbed him this year, and there's no reason for him to play.
Absolutely. All right. We are going to head over to the podcast side of things. You can catch us anywhere you listen to podcasts, DNVR Broncos Podcast, of course. Thanks to everyone who tuned in on the live side. We are going to get to questions on the other side. Come hang out.